So our next speaker on the Dog Worlds panel is Ina Hakkinen, and their talk is titled Human-Animal Interaction Within Nuclear Toxicity, the Dance of Agency in Justin Morgan's The Dogs of Chernobyl. Ina Hakkinen is a visiting researcher of Helsinki in the Helsinki Environmental Humanities Hub, the Department of Cultures at the University of Helsinki. After defending her PhD in literary studies, she has been a grantee of Erasmus Mundus mobility programs, Cambridge College's hospitality scheme, and a research fellow at fellowship programs. She teaches Chernobyl Studies course, nuclear heritage, and nuclear narratives in East Central Europe at the University of Helsinki. And we'll put more in the chat as well. With that, I turn it over to you.
Thank you for inviting and for giving this chance to share the outcomes of my research in the very middle of summer. Yes, I'm a member of Helsinki Environmental Humanities Hub, and where I am doing my project on the literary dimensions of nuclear energy in fictional writings, and actually nowadays it is the fictional writings for children and young adults. I started my research from the literary dimensions of the Chernobyl disaster within the comparative analysis of depicting Chernobyl disaster in Eastern European and North American countries. But then I went beyond these frames, and nowadays the radiation-related issues, nuclear-related issues, such as nuclear science, radiation therapy, uranium mining, and nuclear post-apocalyptic narratives are also in the focus of my research. Yes, but today I'm going to speak about the dogs of Chernobyl, and let me introduce you the novel "The Dogs of Chernobyl: A Human Disaster Through Animal Eyes." Just a novel which was written by Justin Morgan, residing in the United Kingdom, and it is the opening volume of his Animal Eyes series. Justin Morgan presents himself as a writer of realistic animal fiction, and inspired by his research and experience of visiting and studying the former Soviet countries. And in this book, he turns readers to the Chernobyl disaster as both the historical event and ecological rapture. And this he highlights that it is a work of realistic animal fiction for teenagers and young adults. The story is centered on two stray dogs who has names, Oni and Belkar. They are just like families, just within the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and who try to find a safe place to start a family, but the Chernobyl explosion turns this territory into a toxic exclusion zone. As radiation sickness, rival dogs, and the radiative fallout threatens them, these dogs must survive in a collapsing world and decide whether humans are enemies or possibly the humans are their only chance to be the only chance of rescue. The explosion of at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant transforms the environment into the contaminated radiation contaminated exclusion zone, marked by abundant fear and death. And In this sense, the novel is not only a survival story, but also a narrative about the destruction of habitants and the fragility of non-human life, where dogs are not human companions, but self-sufficient actors. It is not the first, and I guess, and I hope not the last book about the Chernobyl dogs, but this book especially relevant for just for the academic analysis, just because of its non-human perspective, presenting Chernobyl primarily not through human witness by human witnesses with the dominating motives of monsterization and victimization, but ask young readers, and I highlight young readers, to imagine the Chernobyl disaster, the nuclear disaster, through animal eyes, which shift attention from human-centered history to multi-species vulnerability. This aligns the novel with animal studies and eco-critical approaches that challenge the anthropocentric storytelling and foregrounds the consequences of the catastrophe for non-human beings. My focus on how the novel represents dogs in this presentation, in this research, I'd like to highlight that the dogs here are not the decorative symbols of human catastrophe. They are not one of the just some of the victims, but as sensing, responding, and emotionally complex being whose lives disclose a multi-species experience of the nuclear disaster. The novel opens by locating Oni. It is one of the dog, just perception at the edge of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which they stray through a glance back to the western horizon, where the plant rises as an unfamiliar and troubling presence. What is important here is that the novel begins not with the human event of nuclear disaster, but with the dog's perception. And the nuclear power plant is not a just industrial object, scientific object for the dogs. The nuclear power plant appears as something threatening and terrifying, and the writer intensifies this effect by describing it as if the smoke it belches gives the impression of enormous sleeping creature. And this metaphor of enormous sleeping creature is crucial because it turns the industrial landscape into something animated, almost bodily implicated. The plant becomes a figure of latent danger, and the dog's perception becomes a way of reading this danger. This is one of the central literary strategies of the novel, as it imagines non-human agency through the embodied perception. The dog's protagonists don't understand Chernobyl in technical terms, but they experience, in effect, through confusion, smell, movement, noise, and bodily vulnerability. When one of the dogs, Belka, says, because the shimmer has spread even further, it is everywhere now, we will have go to the west. The novel gives us a language for contamination that is partial but effective. This shimmer is not the precise scientific description of the radiation, but it captures the dog's encounter with a force which is visible and invisible at the same time, just because dogs can smell this radiation. And in this sense, the novel makes this nuclear disaster legible through the animal's experience. The dragon metaphor develops this further. The dog speaks of the disaster by asking, they are calling it a dragon and wondering whether one really woke up in our town. The answer is not merely mythic, it is environmental. If dragons breathe fire and disease, just they accept the Chernobyl nuclear power as a dragon, then the danger is not single explosive event, but a pervasive condition of living after the explosion. And the following one. And this novel is significant, and that's why this novel is so significant for thinking about non-human agency within the Chernobyl context. The dogs are not passive recipients of the disaster. They interpret, adapt, flee, and remember. Their agency is not independent in a humanist sense, rather it is relational and embodied. They act within a damaged ecology shaped by the human infrastructures, but they still make choices and form social links. At the same time, the novel doesn't idealize the human. It shows the human action as inseparable from non-human suffering. Just in their scene in which one of the dog, Belka, witnesses these mysterious glass-eye creatures, humans, and realizes that they are killing dogs. It is one of the book's most forceful statement about violence, and here the human is not a rescue figure but a source of threat for the dogs. In this sense, The Dogs of Cher, this novel, is an example of literary imaginary of non-human, and my argument is that novel doesn't simply tell us a disaster story, but from the perspective of dogs, rather it constructs a multi-species world in which animal, human, and environment are mutually interconnected. The novel explicitly foregrounds the interconnectedness of species in the aftermath of nuclear disaster. And the explicit theoretical framing of non-human agency in this novel leads us to envisioning this novel through Donna Haraway's perception. Just in her the companion species manifesto, she agrees that humans and dogs are companion species, and they make each other up in significant otherness. And this framework helps us read this novel as a story of co-constitution rather than domination. And the dog protagonists are not simply individual animals struggling alone. They are relational beings whose identities are formed through links with one another and through their connection with humans. Haraway's emphasis on co-constitutive companion species and co-evolution is specifically relevant here. Bruno Latour gives us another crucial theoretical lens for reading this novel, just when he insists that we shouldn't read the social as separate domain or a purely human matter. Instead, we should trace association among heterogeneous actors. And Morgan's novel is strongly Latourian in this sense. The Chernobyl plants, radiation, dogs, humans, roads, food, and ruins all functions and actors in a network of survival, just or hope. The dogs fear the human violence and the plant's contamination and the altered radiation contaminated disaster all participate in shaping outcomes. This also the storyline of the novel leads us to the also alliance with Andrew Pickering concept of the mangle of practice, in which agency is produced through the continuous interplay of human interactions and material resistance. In this novel, the dogs don't simply act in a vacuum; they act in response to pressures from rival dogs, hostile humans, food scarcity, and radioactive change. At the same time, their own adaptive behavior shapes that can happen next. Just maybe I will Pickering dance of agony helps us to widen the envisioning of non-human agency in this novel, just because as he developed it, his mangle of practice work, he described laboratory works where scientists don't simply impose theory on nature, and nature doesn't simply dictate results for scientists. I try to apply this the dance of agency to read this to read this novel as the exact kind of non-human agency in this novel, in the Chernobyl context. What helps me to what was the result of that? Just Pickering dance of danger, dance of agency. Claims that human and material agency are constitutively interconnected in practice, and neither commensant are there. The Morgan's novel stages this at the level of narration itself. By refusing human focalization, the text enacts a decentering of the human subject that Pickering describes as a feature of scientific practice. As for the radiation in this text, it is not a symbol, not a metaphor for human failure. It is an agent as well. It resists contamination. It reshapes the dogs' bodies. It forces both species to revise their goals. As for the human agency, these are human revision in response to the material agency, radiative that resists human mastery in the first place. The zone is quite literally a mangle, a space hosting the interaction of intention and resistant matter. And but the mapping of Pickering dance of agency onto this novel has some controversial points, and just first of all because Pickering himself has never extended this concept to the literary representations. His own ecological tone stays with actual environmental practice, not fiction itself, and that's why this sets the question: should we or shouldn't apply Pickering authority to to interpreting the non-human agency in general? And first of all, first of all, Pickering is careful for keeping human agency and material agency as two distinct poles that get interactively stabilized. But the dogs in this novel, they are not brute matter. They are written with fear, loyalty, honor for safety, and human legible intentions. And secondly, narrative theorists working specifically on non-human narrators shown that giving an animal voice tends to invite focalization as decentering device, which must be doing the opposite, recentering the human. And actually we can see this in this novel. And the Pickering agency of dance of agency genially inscribed that the scientist doesn't know how the apparatus, the matter can behave. But in this novel, Morgan, the author, knows exactly how the novel ends. And every resistance the dogs face and every accommodation they make was ordered in advance, and this situation sets the question about the unpredictability just of the narrative. And the last one, Pickering dance of agency, refuses teleology. The idea that things exist, happen for a specific goal, for a specific end. But in this novel, we can see this move towards a hope, a possible rescue, which actually ruins the idea of ruins the idea of that everything happens for the specific goal. And actually, I guess it's time to conclude. And I'd like to say that such kind of approach allows to reading this novel and apply the Pickering dance of agency metaphor allows us to rethink nuclear disaster not only as a human event, but as a multi-species and relational crisis. And in this case, or in the case of this novel, non-human agency becomes central to how we understand survival, trauma, and adaptation after catastrophe. The dogs in this novel are not the passive victims of history, but they emerge as active participants in a complex network of relations shaped by the environmental damage, human intervention, and biological resistance. Such perspectives deepens our understanding of nuclear traumatic experience by revealing its shape and uneven impact on all forms of life, and it also offers a more inclusive framework for imagining environmental responsibility, conservation, and storytelling. Thank you.